Everyone thinks the Roman gladius was a devastating slashing weapon that cut through enemies like butter. But modern biomechanics just revealed something that would make Hollywood cringe. For centuries, we've been sold a lie about how Roman legionnaires actually fought. And the truth is far more brutal than you ever imagined. The iconic Gladius and pilum didn't work the way most people think, and when scientists finally put these ancient weapons to the test using modern forensic analysis and experimental archaeology, they uncovered battlefield realities that completely shatter our romanticized view of Roman combat. Here's what actually happened when iron met flesh on ancient battlefields, and why everything you thought you knew about Roman military dominance needs to be rewritten. The gladius has been called the sword that conquered the world, a weapon so perfectly designed that it made Rome unstoppable for 400 years. Museums display these short swords with reverence, and every historical documentary shows legionnaires swinging them in wide arcs, cleaving through barbarian hordes with cinematic flair. The problem is that this entire mental image is completely wrong, and Roman soldiers would have been horrified to see anyone fighting that way. When biomechanics researchers examined the actual combat effectiveness of slashing versus stabbing motions, they discovered something that ancient Roman training manuals had been screaming about all along. The gladius wasn't designed for slashing at all. It was an assassination tool disguised as a sword, and the Romans knew exactly why. Here's where it gets interesting. Modern forensic pathology reveals that a stab wound only needs to penetrate 3 to 4 inches deep to reach vital organs and cause rapid incapacitation or death. The gladius blade averaged 18 to 20 inches in length, with a wickedly tapered point specifically engineered for deep tissue penetration. Historical accounts from ancient writers confirm that Roman soldiers were explicitly trained never to slash with their weapons, only to thrust. Vegetius, the Roman military writer, recorded that barbarian warriors would wildly swing their long swords, requiring massive space and exposing their entire right side with each stroke, while Roman legionnaires kept their bodies protected behind their shields and darted their gladius forward in quick, controlled thrusts aimed at the throat, face, groin, and lower abdomen. A slashing cut might cause a dramatic-looking wound, but it rarely stopped a determined enemy immediately. A 4-inch stab to the femoral artery or lower intestines, however, would drop a warrior within seconds from blood loss and shock. The genius of the gladius becomes clear when you understand Roman formation tactics. Legionnaires fought shoulder to shoulder in incredibly tight formations where there simply was unphysical room to swing a sword. The testudo formation and standard battle lines packed soldiers so closely together that each man occupied roughly 3 feet of frontage. Try swinging a sword in that space and you'll hit your own comrades, but a short, controlled thrust forward, that works perfectly. The gladius turned each legionnaire into a precise killing machine who could strike from behind the protection of his scutum shield, withdraw instantly, and reset for another thrust, all while maintaining formation integrity. This wasn't swashbuckling adventure combat. This was industrial-scale slaughter optimized for maximum efficiency with minimum risk. But this is the part most people never hear. When experimental archaeologists conducted penetration tests using recreated gladius swords against period-accurate armor and organic materials simulating human tissue, they discovered that the stabbing technique was devastatingly effective even against protected opponents. The tapered, diamond-shaped cross-section of the gladius blade was specifically engineered to split chainmail rings rather than trying to cut through them. The concentrated force of a thrust, driven by the entire body weight of a trained soldier, could punch through leather armor, padded linen, and even some types of bronze armor if aimed at weak points. Slashing attacks dispersed force across a wider surface area and were much more likely to be deflected or absorbed by armor. The stabbing technique concentrated all that kinetic energy into a point measuring mere millimeters across, generating pressures that could defeat protection that would easily stop a slash. Now this is where researchers were stunned. The metallurgical analysis of recovered gladius blades revealed incredibly sophisticated manufacturing techniques that nobody expected from ancient smiths. Romans were using pattern-welded steel construction and selective carburizing to create blades with hard, sharp edges surrounding a more flexible core. This prevented the blade from shattering on impact while maintaining edge retention. Some gladius specimens contained steel from Noricum in modern Austria that was so highly prized that it was compared to modern high-carbon steel in quality. The Romans weren't just good warriors. They had mastered material science to a degree that would not be matched again in Europe for over 1,000 years. And they applied that knowledge specifically to make their stabbing swords as lethal as possible. Here's the twist almost everyone gets wrong about the pilum. The popular myth says that the Roman javelin was deliberately designed to bend on impact so enemies could unthrow it back. That's partially true, but misses the primary function entirely. The pilum wasn't just a throwaway harassment weapon. It was a shield-destroying, armor-penetrating, formation-breaking terror weapon that modern testing proved was far more devastating than anyone imagined. When experimental archaeologists threw replica pila at reconstructed shields using period-accurate techniques, the results were shocking. The pilum didn't just stick in the shield. It punched completely through wooden planking up to an inch thick, and the long iron shank continued traveling with enough residual energy to potentially wound or kill the person holding that shield. The design of the pilum was diabolically clever. The weapon featured a small pyramidal iron point attached to a long, thin iron shank that measured 2 to 3 feet in length before connecting to the wooden shaft. When thrown from 30 to 60 feet away, which was the standard engagement range, the pilum's weight distribution gave it tremendous momentum. Modern physics calculations show that a pilum thrown by a trained soldier generated impact energies comparable to some modern firearms. That narrow iron shank was the key to everything. It concentrated all that momentum into a tiny point that could defeat shields and armor through pure penetration mechanics. Once the point broke through a shield, the long shank followed. And if an enemy soldier was positioned behind that shield, the tip was still moving with lethal force when it reached flesh. But here's what changed everything. Testing revealed that the supposed bending of the pilum shank wasn't always intentional or even desirable. According to Plutarch, the Roman general Gaius Marius modified the pilum design by replacing one of the iron rivets holding the shank to the wooden shaft with a weak wooden pin that would break on impact. This caused the shank to hinge and hang downward from the shield, making it impossible to use. However, earlier pilum designs used 2 iron rivets and didn't bend easily at all. Archaeological evidence shows many pilum points that are completely straight with no signs of bending. The real devastation came from penetration, not bending. A pilum that punched through your shield and into your chest did you need to bend to be effective. It had already done its job by killing you. Modern ballistics testing compared the pilum to other ancient projectile weapons and found that it had superior armor penetration to almost everything else available in the ancient world except for perhaps heavy crossbow bolts. The long iron shank acted like a modern armor-piercing fin-stabilized penetrator, maintaining structural integrity and driving deep into targets. Tests against reproduction chainmail showed that the pilum point could split mail rings and continue through with minimal energy loss. Even plate armor had weak points that a precisely thrown pilum could exploit. The psychological impact was equally important. Imagine standing in a shield wall and watching a volley of hundreds of these armor-piercing javelins arc toward you. Soldiers knew that their shields and armor might not save them. That fear broke formations before the Legionnaires even closed to Gladius range. The combined arms approach of pilum followed by Gladius was what made Roman legions unstoppable. The pilum volley, typically thrown in waves from distances of 60 feet, 40 feet, and finally 20 feet as formations closed, would disrupt enemy formations, destroy shields, wound soldiers, and create chaos. By the time the Legionnaires made physical contact, their enemies were already disorganized, partially disarmed, and psychologically shattered. Then came the grinding, mechanical butchery of Gladius, thrusts from behind shield walls. Enemies who fought with courage and desperation found themselves unable to effectively counterattack against soldiers who exposed almost nothing to strike at and who killed with quick, precise stabs that were nearly impossible to block or parry. Roman military doctrine turned warfare into a science, and their weapons were the laboratory instruments of death. The historical record confirms what modern testing revealed. Roman victories consistently came against numerically superior forces, against enemies who were often individually braver and physically larger than Roman soldiers, and even against opponents who had superior cavalry or terrain advantages. The weapons made the difference. A Celtic warrior with a 3-foot longsword and no armor beyond a shield was at a catastrophic disadvantage against a legionnaire with Gladius, scutum, and pilum, who had trained for months in efficient killing techniques. The Gladius and pilum weren't just good weapons. They represented a fundamental revolution in military technology and tactics that would be surpassed until the development of gunpowder weapons over a millennium later. So here's the truth that shatters the myth. The Gladius wasn't a slashing sword for heroic duels. It was a close-quarters assassination tool optimized for formation fighting. The pilum wasn't primarily designed to bend. It was an armor-piercing javelin that could kill through shields and mail. Roman legionnaires didn't win through individual martial prowess or savage barbarian courage. They won through superior technology, relentless training, and tactical doctrine that turned each soldier into an interchangeable component in a killing machine. The devastating effectiveness of these weapons wasn't movie magic or ancient propaganda. It was biomechanical reality verified by modern science. And it explains how a relatively small city-state conquered the entire Mediterranean world and held it for centuries. Hollywood got it wrong. The history textbooks simplified it. But the forensic evidence and experimental archaeology revealed the brutal truth. Roman weapons worked exactly as designed, and they were far more lethal than anyone gives them credit for. What myth should I break down next?